This is Akafe. Laura Marie and Jessica Marie proudly present A Court of Fandoms and Exploration, a podcast. Fair warning, everything the hosts say is explicit, full of spoilers and adult content, and shall not be used against them. They have opinions. Let's try not to drag anyone for expressing themselves and just have fun for an hour. We all deserve it.
Happy winter solstice!
Here we are launching on a solstice.
Which is also Feyre's birthday.
Yes, which is also Feyre's birthday, but also important because of the prominence of the solstice in the fantasy realms. Darkest night of the year. Very important, very cool. And today we're talking about ourselves. Since we're just starting off in this episode, I thought it would be, a good idea for you, the listener, to get to know us. I'm Laura Marie. And in true millennial form, I'll start off by using my Harry Potter house to define me. I'm a Slytherin. I'm also an Aries sun, Virgo moon, and a Capricorn rising, so take from that what you will. I moved from Detroit to Florida, and as you can imagine, it was quite a culture shock. So I turned to the Accelerated Reader Program to help escape the weirdness of being, quite honestly, the tallest person in my grade and also the new kid in a small town. I really, really hated being forced to read books at school. I never really understood why the classics were forced on us, especially because when you're that young, they're not good. Even though now, Frankenstein and Dracula and all of those are important and, you can see why you should read them. But when you're young, who cares? I don't know. It didn't really make sense to me. I really discovered that I loved books when I was, maybe 11, 12 or so, when I started reading Francesca Lia Block and The Hanged Man. That book just blew my mind, and I highly recommend it if you haven't read it. It is just poetry, and it's about LA, so that's also a plus. And I also really love Daughters of the Moon by Lynn Ewing, which is kind of a hard sell, but also about LA. There is a theme, and it's pretty cool. And then all of those things coupled with Buffy were very foundational in who I am as a person. My absolute favorite fantasy series is A Pattern of Shadow and Light by Melissa McPhail. No one has read these books. Absolutely no one. But the narrator is Nick Podell, and he's my absolute favorite narrator for audiobooks. And I will say that I am an audiobook reader. That's how I consume my books, which is a whole other episode. But going from that, my least favorite read that I have read this year has to be, without a doubt, Serpent and Dove. It's terrible. It is absolutely awful. And I think that is because of the male narrator. He's like William Shatner on crack. It's just horrific. My favorite YA series is The Folk of the Air. So that's Cruel Prince, Wicked King, Queen of Nothing, and the new book that's coming out that shall not be named until I have it in my hands. Of course, ACOMAF, we all know this, and Throne of Glass, which is very important. I will say that as much as I love Sarah J. Maas, I have not read Catwoman, and I don't think anyone's read Catwoman. We don't know her. We don't include her in our heroines. It is just not something that we really acknowledge. That being said, we love Crescencetti, and we love Bryce.
Oh, Team Bryce. We love her.
Team Bryce. One little thing about Throne of Glass, because Jessica here hasn't read it, is I cannot, and I've reread this series several times, I cannot make myself finish the last book, Empire of Storms. I cannot. It breaks me. And on top of that, starting Kingdom of Ash is also very difficult. So Jessica has yet to read them, and she will, and that is something that she has to look forward to, and I'm very, very excited about that.
I still have yet to read it because I've done the ACOTAR series. I've read Crescent City. I've emotionally been broken where I had to fall out of it for a little bit just to distract me. I have to emotionally prepare myself because there's a lot, and book talk gets me excited, but also fearful of my anxiety and depression that is very, very much alive. When I finished ACOMAF and ACOWAR, like I lost 12 pounds in 10 days. My nutritionist was mad at me. Like I couldn't eat, I couldn't drink, I couldn't sleep. I would be up, I had insomnia. It was actually probably really unhealthy, which I'm sure book talk can super relate to. I went through a terrible breakup and I don't even think I was this affected. So take that for what you will. But if we're going to do the whole astrology thing, I'm a Capricorn sun, Libra moon, rising Virgo. I don't even know what that means, except that in true Capricorn form, I am an ambitious workaholic, but in the best sense to me, because I love work. It relaxes me, which leads into my Harry Potter house in true Ravenclaw form. I like learning. I like applying the things that I learn to what I do. And then I get to marry the two of my passions, which is work and my career in the entertainment industry. Growing up, books were everywhere. We were encouraged to read. We had limited TV time, but that also probably feeds into part of the reason why I'm completely obsessed with my career now, because I get to be fully immersed in something that I was denied growing up. So I get to be part of the entertainment industry. I get to consume media on all levels. I could watch a movie and say I'm doing research. Even with reading, I could look up casting characters myself and be like, oh, it's research. Everything comes down to research at the foundation. I remember during different school breaks, I'd go to my aunt's outside of Boston, and the second we would land, before we even get home, we would go to the bookstore and we would make at least 2 to 3 additional trips from the first one, because I'm a speed reader. I could just pick up a book, finish it the next day, or even within that day. So books have just kind of always been ingrained in me. For 3rd grade, Laura, I know I haven't told you this story.
That's very exciting.
So Laura and I have known each other for 16 years, and I know I haven't shared this story. So in 3rd grade, there was a Secret Santa. One of those Secret Santas that it wasn't for a specific person. Everybody just brought something and you just picked based on the numbers. Well, my lovely childhood, I was last in everything, including Secret Santa. And apparently all the kids didn't come to school that day. So as the last person, there was no Secret Santa gift left for me.
Oh no, that's traumatizing.
Yes. On top of always being picked last in school. So what did the teacher do? She gave me her almanac that was on her desk. Like that was my Secret Santa gift.
Wait, how did you feel about that?
I felt awful. I was always the kid who was bullied. I was always the kid who was ostracized. It just contributes to like everything. But hey, I taught myself sign language from that thing. That was like, people are like, oh, how do you know the sign language alphabet? Because there was no Secret Santa.
At least you got a skill.
It's so sad. That's not where everything stems from, but it contributes to so much of isolating myself. And then what was also cool is we had this reading program. So you would mark how often, like how many minutes you read. And if you can earn free tickets to Six Flags based on how much you read. So me, the lonely kid with the almanac, would read 10 minutes here, read 7 minutes there, read 30 minutes here. That's my grade school story that really sticks out regarding reading. Now, I was very much a chick lit, contemporary romance. I call it trash novels, but I say it in such an endearing way. And I say it with love because I feel like when you talk to other people, especially in a coworker setting, you can't really openly say that you like chick lit. It's because they're not the classics or they're not this like memoir. And there's such a stigma that comes from them. I don't even want to begin with some of the covers, because sometimes just the covers are embarrassing, which thank God for ebooks, because you don't have to show anybody those covers. But then when I go on Goodreads, the covers are there. And then you have people who are like, that's what she's reading. I'm like, it's so much more than this stupid cover. But is it? It's not. But it's just, they're always happily ever afters. They're Hallmark movies in a book. I don't necessarily have that happiness going on in my life, so I'm going to live through it vicariously through words. I think to what you said, Laura, I've never read the classics. Like you said, you don't appreciate them when you're younger. And then in our high school girl, usually you start reading the classics in high school. I feel like because there was different levels of literature. You had your standard English, you had your remedial English, you had your English honors. And then my high school, we had dual enrollment and AP English. The advanced placement and the dual enrollment is like you're dually enrolled both in high school and college classes, and you can get credit for them. Whereas with the AP, you have to take the advanced placement test and score like 4 or 5 to get the college credit. Dual enrollment, you automatically get it as long as you're passing. So I feel like the classics were introduced with the remedial and standard level Englishes, at least at my high school. So then I was never exposed to them because I was always in the advanced classes. And, at this point in my life, I didn't go back to, I'm just going to go back and read it. I'd much rather watch Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet than read it in a book. I don't know. Leonardo DiCaprio. That movie could be anybody's awakening, regardless of who you're attracted to.
Just thinking of John Leguizamo and his being able. Fantastic. Just so fantastic. That's a really good point that you make. Listening to other people in your class reading Romeo and Juliet as you go down the row is not the best way to consume a classic work of literature.
I remember junior year, we were reading The Scarlet Letter. So instead of the back and forth of, going down the rows, everybody was assigned a role. So at least from like an auditory perspective, you had the same person reading the same role throughout the semester.
That's pretty good. Although you were reading The Scarlet Letter, you definitely went to public high school.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, why? You guys gonna read it again? Yeah, I mean, I was in public school, private. I went to private Catholic school when I was younger, but I definitely hit the public school, high school. My family, I had to test into it because it was just so wild.
I went to private Catholic high school, and I know for a fact that we read Frankenstein. We weren't allowed to read Dracula, and everything was we don't really need to get into it.
There's a lot more censored. Well, I don't know. Would you say that there's more censorship because of the Catholic Church, like the involvement there? Do you feel like you had more freedom because it was private and it wasn't as restricted?
I think it was absolutely restrictive. I remember specifically reading about the Salem witch trials, and, we went through all of that. And what is that? What is it? The play.
Oh,
I know. I'm thinking about
it.
Yeah, I know. It'll come to us later.
Oh, I was going to say The Crucible. It's not The Crucible.
That is.
It is The Crucible.
Yeah. Yeah. We did that, and we couldn't read it as it was. It was censored, and we couldn't read certain parts. Yeah, it was upsetting. It was just very upsetting, especially when I got older and we watched, witchy stuff like Salem, and it was, provocative, and you're like, wait a second. This isn't what I remember.
After public high school in general, I feel like some people get away from reading, if not before then, because it's about finding what you like, right? And then sometimes you don't even find that till you're older, or you grow and you learn and you're like, I like this genre now and I like this other one later. I mean, I made it a point in December of last year to be like, you know what? I want to read more. I haven't really read recreationally outside of college for so long. I was working full time, I was employed full time. I was going to school. I was doing internships, but I didn't have any time for me. My time was pretty much allotted for. So I made it a point. I was like, I just casually was like, I want to read more this year. And I did. As of last night, I was 72.
Talk about your achievement last night.
Oh, 2 books in one day.
Yeah.
I was so excited for that. I have never done that. I finished 2 books in one day. That's a huge thing. I mean, again, it's not like I wasn't reading The Cat in the Hat. Like I wasn't reading Dr. Seuss. But they were just like quick novels. But I think that's also funny because it used to be, oh my gosh, because I've gotten into audiobooks a lot this year also, where a book used to be, 7-9 hours. And now you're like, that's easy. We can do this. Like, that's an accomplishment. And then you think of Crescent City, which is 33 hours plus, it's just so good. I can't wait to talk about Crescent City. Disclaimer, I'm new to the fantasy genre of it all in a book realm, as in August this year new. So please don't come for me. I'm emotionally floating through these books, and we are going to be leaning heavily into Laura as my sensei. She's kind of introduced me. She's got me into this. She's been begging me for years to get into these worlds. And I'm like, yeah. She goes, no, I really think, especially with A Court of Mist and Fury, she was like, no, I think you can relate. I was not in a great point. And I was, yeah, that sounds good. Ha ha ha. Now I'm just mad at myself because I have loved these worlds in a TV and film capacity already, meeting the actors, going to cons, working conventions, and even just being in the industry as a whole now. So now I'm just mad at myself. But Akamath and Akawar had me in severe book hangovers for at least 2 weeks. So thank you, Laura, for that. I appreciate you. Like I said earlier, my nutritionist yelled at me, but I cosplayed as Bryce Quinlan this year for Halloween, and I looked good in my dress, so I don't even care what my nutritionist said.
Safely and socially distanced.
Oh, yes, totally safely and socially distanced, like me and one friend. And we were apart. We were 6 feet apart, and she was taking pictures. Completely COVID appropriate Halloween.
Which is the best. And I will say that it was very satisfying to watch you have these reactions to these books, because I've been on my own for a very long time with these books, and with you reading them and then adding in Book Talk, which has completely just opened doors and changed lives. I think the book community has really
thriving.
It is thriving.
Amazon is sold out of Queen of Nothing. These are books that, unless it was Harry Potter, would have never been sold out.
Absolutely. Especially with Queen of Nothing when it came out last year or the year before. And I know that it's in this year's Goodreads competition. It's in by the skin of its teeth, which is very interesting because it's in there with all the new releases from this year.
Right. And I just finished Queen of Nothing the other day. It was so good.
Yes.
The fact itself could be its own episode.
No, we know exactly what the Folk of the Air episode will be, and it's about it's about a certain body part.
Oh, I always block that out. I don't know why. But Laura is, poor Laura. So Laura, a little bit about Laura and I right now. I'm based out of New York, and Laura's living in Germany. So we have a nice 6-hour difference between us. So I'll be going to sleep reading, and I'll record my reactions, and sometimes I upload them onto TikTok. She's usually the person I send my most genuine reactions to first. So I'm going to bed freaking out about wherever I am in the book, and Laura's the one who has to deal with the ear-pitching screams or my sobs. Like, this is, as my best friend, she's also the person who listens to my voicemails of me crying over a boy. So now she gets to see me crying over these fictional characters that I'm just so deeply and heavily involved with. I can't like anything halfway. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, where you're just like, I can't be a casual person who consumes media. All or nothing.
I think that's a nice segue to mention our con life. I'm just thinking of this now. It's another thing that I pulled you into with New York Comic Con and Philadelphia Wizard World and the Supernatural Convention.
Oh, yeah.
And Walker Stalker Con, all of these things. That is an interesting part of our life that would not have been the same if we had done it individually. It's always better when we do it together.
Oh, absolutely. And I think a lot of the topics that, whether it's the books or the cons, or even we're going to be discussing a lot about the stigmas that come with these passions of ours. I was raised as somebody who you have to worry about how you're perceived to the world. You are a representation of this family. You are an extension. You need to carry yourself a certain way, to the point where like my parents censored who I could be friends with because of their perceptions of certain people. And that, I feel like that also contributed to maybe some of the genres that I got into, the things that I liked. It definitely, I didn't enjoy con life because I think there is a stigma that goes with people who participate in Comic-Cons. It was unfortunately not something that people would want to associate with in the past. And now it's such a popular thing. And I think one of the nice things I really appreciated, Zachary Levi had this interview with the Build series. He said something along the lines of, people want to hate on nerds or geeks or whatever, but at the end of the day, at our core, we're all a nerd for something. So why are we making it a negative thing? And I think that's so important to focus on, because it goes back to the all or nothing. There's something very personal. When you're passionate about something, it's okay to say you're a nerd because it's something that you love.
Absolutely right. I'm thinking of the things that we love so much. And the first thing that I'm thinking of is Doctor Who.
That was, I feel like, another wave that I got into the con and sci-fi of it all, because I don't want to say I'm an analytical person, but I question things a lot. And I remember you said, just keep watching it. And I go, I just don't get it. This part wouldn't make sense. And then flash forward to Avengers Endgame last year, and someone was explaining time travel, and they go, wait, so Back to the Future is a lie? And I was like, wait, no, that absolutely makes sense, that your past is your future. The whole description where the general public was like, that doesn't make sense. And as people who are familiar with comics and sci-fi and fantasy, you held a beat. You're like, wait, that absolutely makes sense.
It does. It kind of goes into you have to just let it flow over you and absorb it all. And it's so hard to do. But once you are in it, then it is easier to branch off into other things, which is very important. I bring this up for Jessica, who's new to the genre. When I was pitching ACOTAR and ACOMAF to her, and I was telling her that it's about the Fae, it was a challenge for her because of the, I guess, a stigma, the misconception of Fae versus fairy. And it is very different. Fairies are very different from the Fae, especially the Fae in Sarah J. Maas. Her Fae are completely different from, I would say, fairies. And I am thinking of the Queen of Nothing. Those are fairies, but it's, Faer instead of Fairy. They're not, Tinkerbells. We're not into that kind of fairy world.
Give me an SJM male any day. Like, that's its own episode, because I have hard eyes the whole time.
And it also makes me want to bring up something that happened to me in New Jersey. Jess, you know this. I had started a new job in New Jersey, and we were going around the room doing icebreakers, and people were asking, what's the most recent book that you had read? And I lied, because I was reading a YA book, and I did not think that that was appropriate for the setting that I was in. So I said that I was reading The Hobbit, kind of in the same vein or whatever, but more respectable for whatever reason. And then my boss said in front of everybody that she was reading 50 Shades of Grey, and everyone around her went, oh, yes, oh, you'll love it.
Not even like a gasp of the horror, but like into it.
They were so into it. And I was so embarrassed. I was embarrassed for her. I was embarrassed for them. And then I was embarrassed about myself. Like, why did I, and this goes back to you talking about stigma, why did I feel like I needed to lie about reading YA? Like, yes, I'm not the target audience for YA. And I think that is its own episode too, YA versus new adult, even though new adult didn't really take off.
But even appreciating YA as not a young adult. I didn't read young adult when I was a young adult. I don't think. Or if I did, and we've had this conversation too, of who were the heroines? What, like Jessica and Elizabeth from Sweet Valley High or the Babysitters Club? The only person I liked in the Babysitters Club was Stacy because she was from New York and then she had to get implanted into the suburbs. Girl, same. Like, I struggle.
And I think that's something that really resonated with you too, is in YA and in your, as we say fondly, your trash books, but I think more so in YA, you find there is a rich environment of strong women and doing revolutionary things.
And that's important because we're just now seeing that happen more and more, in not just in a book capacity, but in a public capacity. We now have a woman of color vice president in the White House. It has been over 200 years, and we are now just seeing the excitement of women in power in these powerful positions. And I think that's the direction it needs to continue.
Absolutely. And of course, we have to do a shout out to the beautiful community of TikTok teens who have really grown up with the Hunger Games, who have grown up with these books that have shaped them into revolutionaries. And we celebrate and applaud that because they will save us.
I think we've had this conversation, people want to hate on millennials, but Gen Z is the first generation where the generation that came before them are excited. I stand Gen Z. I try to be like Regina George's mom. I feel cool. I feel young. I'm not a regular millennial. I'm a cool millennial because I feel like I can relate to them more now because of Book Talk, because of TikTok in general. And I'm so proud of the people that they're becoming. Like, they have this voice that we were trained or taught growing up to be quiet, to be nice, to be respectful. Even if somebody didn't earn that respect, you still needed to be this good girl. And that comes from also from growing up in the South. It is drilled into you.
It really is. And I think having an outlet like TikTok has been world altering, and I'm very excited to see where it goes, and very excited because of the way that TikTok and Book Talk specifically fills in the gaps for kind of the different fandoms. So you have, which we recently shared, it was what it looks like if Cardan loves you. And it was just all these images with like music playing and it's running through fields and daggers and crowns and snakes.
But that can also, I feel like that's also contributing. I don't know if you've gotten to this part of TikTok because I'm on mental health TikTok a lot. It just pops up for non-obvious reasons. But they talk about the maladaptive daydreaming. Have you come across that?
No, my For You page is Book Talk, horses, and frogs.
I can't believe you're still on frog TikTok.
I'm still on frog TikTok. I'm also slightly on witch TikTok, which is very interesting, and I love it very much.
Is the witch TikTok the same thing as the spiritual TikTok?
No.
Oh, okay. So I'm definitely off. No, I'm on Book Talk, BLM TikTok, definitely mental health awareness, but sometimes maladaptive daydreaming coincides with the Book Talk community, and everyone's like, wait, that's not just me creating fanfics in my head. This is a disorder. I was like, this is so wild. But this is probably how fanfics also start. People create these worlds in their head. They're like, I'm going to write that down.
Sure. And of course, we love and acknowledge the importance that fanfic has.
I can't wait for that episode.
Exactly. To the genres, please rest assured that fanfiction will have its own dedicated episode.
I have so many thoughts.
I'm thinking immediately of my quarantine For You page on TikTok being all about Kylo Ren and very explicit.
I'm just thinking of when I was reading, and I mean, I'll explore it further. When I was reading more fanfics. I can say it was like 2014 to 2015 because that was the best season of Arrow and I was reading all the Olicity fanfics. My vocabulary improved because I was like, wait, I've never heard this word before. And people are clearly using a thesaurus, which, hey, great. I just had to like touch my finger on a screen and I learned a new word. That happened to you recently too, didn't it?
I was just thinking, I cannot remember what that word was.
No, I think it was like turgis or something. Turgis.
It was describing the hardness of a nipple. Which will, of course, be its own episode when we talk about smut.
That is its own episode because you have people who are like, this is this spicy, and they held hands. You're like, you just held hands? Okay, good for you. Maybe you're reading fanfics in Utah.
Burn. Speaking of spiciness, I will say that the spiciest book that I have read this year has, without a doubt, been A Kingdom of Flesh and Fire.
Really? Is it because of that scene that you were telling me about, but kind of not?
The like kind of alluding to the joining scene.
Right.
Not as hot as some of the other ones. It got pretty heated. And you're just like, wow. Jess hasn't read it. I don't want to give it away, but you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And I'm very excited for this three-way that has been promised.
And I haven't read it yet because Laura, I was like, do I read it? Because I keep trying to put off Throne of Glass. And she goes, the third book comes out. Wait till the third book comes out. So then you could just like binge all three back to back. So I'll definitely read it, the two, right before the third one comes out. So then Laura and I will eventually have an episode about the third book or where we are with that reading process, because I have to play 15 million years of catch up in regards to this fantasy genre. And it's hard to be involved with book talk right now because I want to be engaged. And then I also don't want to have spoilers because some of these spoilers are, I don't want it to be ruined. And I had one spoiler happen in Crescent City and I freaked out and I told Laura and she was like, well, it's not that big of a part. And I was like, are we sure? And she goes, you're fine, you're sure. But that makes a huge difference in my experience. And to go with what Laura was saying was sometimes, especially with the sci-fi fantasy genre, you have to just go with it. And even as I've learned to go with it, I'm still also very much a person to guess and have speculations because I just want to be right. I just want to be able to say, like, I knew it. And then when I'm not right, she's like, and she keeps saying, you just have to go with it. Don't make speculations. Because every time I've made a speculation in the SJM world specifically, I've been wrong. I've been wrong 80% of the time. I was right about Reese, like right in the beginning of Akamath. I was like, he's going to show up.
That's true. You were.
The only thing I was right about.
But yeah, her big twist though. Boy, oh boy. But, you know, it's important to note that you're not alone in that. We know that SJM isn't perfect. We know she has her own issues, but I'll be damned, that woman can write a plot and she can plan out a plot. And I think we're all very excited for you, Jess, to go ahead and start Throne of Glass so that you can experience what it's like to have a slow burn payoff and then to lose your absolute shit.
I know everybody has a different way of reading them, but as I had mentioned before, I'm leaning heavily into Laura as my sensei, so I will be reading it in the direction she tells me.
And that direction is Throne of Glass, then book 2, and then it is up to Jess to read Assassin's Blade before book 3 or after book 3, but she must read it before book 4. I will, of course, leave it up to her if she wants to read Tower of Dawn. People don't like Tower of Dawn. It is what it is. You could, I guess, theoretically skip it and then just like read, I don't know, like a summary of it.
It sounds like it was super impactful to the series.
Yeah, you'll understand what I mean. Jess has in her possession the Throne of Glass coloring book without having read any of it.
So we are in a quarantine COVID life. So TikTok has taken over my life. And one of my scrolling sessions, somebody had found this ACOTAR coloring book and they found it at the Dollar General or something. I had traveled to $12 Generals by my house in 2 days and I could not find ACOTAR anywhere. But I found one Throne of Glass and I was just like, I'm just going to grab it. I haven't read it. I haven't opened it, but I have a feeling I'm going to need this at some point. And again, this goes back to also, I can't like anything halfway. When I tell you this is the only thing I wanted for weeks and all I could find was the Throne of Glass, I went to every Dollar General or whatever it was. And I found Throne of Glass and it's on my shelf. It's right behind all of my SJM books, all of them, because I have the hard copies, I have the new covers, I have the signed first edition. They're scattered amongst the poor guy I ever bring home. I told you, he's going to go into the living room and he's going to be like, oh, a biography on Walt Disney. Oh, the marketing, the science behind marketing and consumerism. And then my bedroom is like, it's going to be like, what was it, Dodgeball? When he goes to the girl's house and it's unicorns everywhere.
Oh, it's all unicorns. Oh.
That's going to be me, my SJM bedroom.
You're like, I really just like Faye.
And then I have fan art. I'm going to have to, what am I going to do? Put them in a photo album and so I don't get to enjoy them? I have to put the fan art out somehow.
Shout out to the new fan art being released on the 17th, probably out by the time this episode is released, of course, but I'll be goddamned. I want it real bad.
I want it all. And we're new to all of this in regards to podcasting and social media. We have our personal Instagram pages and stuff, but we're going to be very much about women empowering women and just giving appropriate shout outs. So you're going to see a lot of that from our Instagram pages of fan art we like, things that are funny, people that we like, accounts that we appreciate, because that's what this whole thing is. It's a community and we want to immerse ourselves in the conversation. You know, I think it's hard. One, it's hard to make friends. Hard it's to find people with like-mindedness, especially when you're in quarantine. What are you going to do? Go to a library? Like the library, you have to be quiet. Like you really can't socialize or talk about this stuff. And we just want everybody to grow and find like a safe space where we can all just openly talk about the things that we love and the things that we appreciate, because sometimes the internet is rough. The internet itself, blogging sites and Reddit, and people are complaining, and you know, why do we have to focus on the negativity around everything? You need to find these silver linings, especially right now, especially with different parts of the world in lockdown, coming out of lockdown, going back in. We've been ruined for 11 months, it feels like.
Yeah, it's almost COVID's birthday.
We celebrate that.
Happy birthday, COVID. Go the fuck away. No one wants you. Going back to women empowering women, I also just want to make it very clear that cosplaying is really difficult, and it's something that we are not great at. And we are going to be shouting out some of these fantastic cosplayers that we have found as we've really dove into everything related to the fandoms. I'm thinking of 3 off the top of my head that are just absolutely fantastic.
Mass Trash.
Yes, Mass Trash. And
Peachy Kush.
Peachy. And then there's another one that I recently just found that's like the 3 of them together are very good. And we love them. We love what they can do. It's not just makeup skills. It's not just getting a wardrobe. It's so much more than that. And it's just something that I know that I could never pull off.
That we can even dive into later. I just appreciate there's an art to it. I feel like they become the character. For me with the Bryce Quinlan cosplay, like I didn't even consider it a cosplay. Like I felt like I dressed up based on like the outfits that were described from the book, but I didn't feel like I was bringing her to the forefront. I don't know. That's its own conversation for Crescent City.
In case you're wondering, Crescent City will be our next episode, and we are going to dive very, very deep into that and Jessica's reaction to that, which has been astonishing.
One thing I know people will have a misconception about Capricorns is that we're very hard, we're very rigid, walls are up. I will probably 99.9% sure I will cry during that episode talking about it, because I still can't emotionally reread it because it hits so hard for me.
Which is fantastic, because I gave this book recommendation to her after she read through ACOTAR. I was like, it's
it's lighter. You'll be fine.
It'll be a little bit easier. there's maybe 3 or 4 parts where you'll be sad, but, I only really cried in one. And then she's sending me these reaction videos where she can't speak,
Sobbing.
like ugly crying. I was just like, whoa, shit.
That was, you've also said that about other things. You're like, oh, it's fine. And then, oh, never mind. I'm not going to go there because that's another spoiler. But there will be spoilers in our podcast because there's going to be so much crossover in the conversations that we're having.
Absolutely. So, don't come for us about that. There will be a disclaimer. There's all sorts of things. So don't ever worry about that. And in the episode titles, we'll be very clear about kind of the topic that we will be discussing. So next episode, it will be Crescent City, but we will probably pull in from other things. So just kind of know that going in. But also these books have been out there a lot and have been discussed a lot too. So, I mean, if at this point you don't really know what's going on, then, I mean, that's on y'all.
Even in the episode descriptions, if we know we're talking about certain books, like we'll give you guys a heads up, like, hey, there's going to be spoilers for A through Z. Take that as you will. Some people love spoilers, some people don't. For me, it also depends on the book. It depends on the show. And it's not just books that we're talking about either. There's a lot of things that are pulled from shows that we've watched that you just see that crossover, overarching themes that tie into a lot of the things that we discuss.
Absolutely. It's just something that we will be very mindful of.
I don't know how mindful.
Well, as mindful as we can be.
Like, how can you have the conversation if it's going to be spoiler free?
And also, I think that goes back to the excerpts that are being released for the upcoming Cassian and Nesta Court of Silver Flames book. Sarah J. Maas has been, as she always does, releasing little out of context excerpts that could be considered spoilers. But again, like, you don't know the context, so I guess not really. And I think that is important too. Because if we're talking about something and you don't know the context of it, is it really a spoiler? I don't know, not to get philosophical, but
that's like in the excerpts from Queen of Nothing that I had seen. When I was on Amazon, I was like, oh, and then I was looking through like these posts and I was freaking out because I thought I was being spoiled. But then I remembered, 1, they were posted publicly before I even got to it. But 2, you don't know the context. So even one of the quotes in the beginning of the book, if it was just the quote itself, you would think, okay, this is a heavy spoiler. But then once you read it, you realize it's not a spoiler, really. It's a dream. But you don't know it's the dream unless you knew the context. That's also something. There's always a dream sequence.
There is always a dream sequence. An episode about dream sequences and what they do and do not mean could be very interesting.
There's so much is going to be fun.
Yeah, so all of these conversations that we're having, all of these ideas that we are spitballing is kind of the reason why we decided to make this podcast, because we need someone else to hear it, because we're just talking to ourselves.
That's really it. I think, I don't want to say we're going in circles, but it's to bring other people into the conversation. And it's not just one thing or the other. And I think we bring in a quote unquote adult perspective. I mean,
absolutely. And I really want to point out that kind of the overarching theme of this podcast is going to be just like strong, powerful women and the kind of influence that has on people and the story. I have not come across a female character that has been like super annoying or made terrible decisions in the YA genre. Now there are obviously some people that I don't like for various reasons, but we're all about empowering women here, and we're going to kind of stick to that. So I think that having kind of a platform to celebrate women is very important, and we're going to be using this to do that. And it helps us too, because we are very powerful women.
Or we're trying to remind ourselves that we are powerful women.
We have our moments. And I think that speaks to the power of books too, because when you start to feel that you doubt yourself, you can always go back to a book that has a strong female character. And of course, Jess, I'm thinking about Bryce in Crescent City.
Yeah, I know.
That is your like comfort character.
Yeah.
You can go back to her when you need to feel the strong ties of friendship, because that book isn't specifically about romantic love.
Right. No, I think right off the top of my head, I was thinking of the video I sent you that I wound up posting on TikTok, where I was just like, can we just say for a second that, and it coincides with Jude also, that these are people, these are characters that people look down on because they're not fully immortal or fully magical. Yet you're relying on these people who can do the job that you cannot do. And it's these powerful women who also have to remind themselves who the fuck they are. And I think it's so special that you don't even see that. You don't see that often, and if you do, you really got to dig. And they're not fun. Or if they are a strong person, they aren't this fun. Like they're all like studious and uptight. And, there's so many ways to be powerful. And I think these characters exude that sense of self and strength and different lived experiences.
Especially when you're thinking that they're not fun, and they all have some sort of trauma. There's a lot of TikTok videos that talk about the mental illnesses that a lot of the characters have, both men and women. And it is very important to acknowledge that, and acknowledge that through their own strength, through the strength of their friends and family and the support that they have, for the most part, been able to dig themselves out of that kind of situation and kind of grow from that, while also acknowledging that that kind of growth doesn't happen overnight and that it does leave scars. And that just speaks to the strength of the books, the genre, the authors, and the characters.
Which makes it so relatable. Where these stories are happening are not real, but where the stories are coming from are very real. People go through this regularly. People have experienced their own trauma. People have to dig themselves out, and they have to rely on themselves. And people do rely on other people, and to what you said with mental health. I think that's what makes it so relatable, even if it's not in a realistic world.
And I think that's a really good segue to say again that our next episode will be about Crescent City. It will be about the beautiful friendship that is in that book and the heartbreak as well. And it will be Jessica sobbing.
Me sobbing the whole time. I'm just gonna keep tissues. Maybe we won't video record that one. Just see me crying on the internet.
We love that. We love that
vulnerability.
We love the vulnerability. We love that those characters can kind of bring that out. And my friends are with me, and I am not afraid.
Stop it! I hate you so much. I hate you, but I love you.
And I think that is a really nice way to wrap up this episode and kind of lead into the next one.
So feel free to join us as we talk into the abyss every Monday. Subscribe, follow us on Instagram at Acafe Podcast, ACOFAE Podcast.
Yeah, we look forward to seeing you next week.
Thanks. Bye.